So we've been talking, or I have been talking, and you've been listening, but you've been participating in this as well with the idea of saying yes. And today is the idea of saying yes to today. Ernest Holmes, our founder, had this to say. He said, "There's a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which in its original state permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the universe." So it's everywhere present, permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner space of the universe. A thought in this substance produces the thing that is imagined by the thought. We form things in our thoughts, and by impressing our thoughts upon formless substance, we cause the thing we think about to be created. So a long way of saying that which we dwell upon, that which we think about, that which we give our energy to, we experience. Now the Buddhists would say it's a mosaic, and I would agree with that, because it's not a straight line. If you were to think for a moment that that you're going to leave here and continue to repeat the affirmation that I am a hamburger, you can do that from now until eternity. You will never be a hamburger. Unless, of course, you reincarnate as a cow, and then, of course, that whole process, and you would have the opportunity to be a hamburger. But I'm just saying that that the Buddhists will say that the present moment conditions are created by conditions. And when we shift the conditions of what's happening in our lives, then those different conditions create a different experience in our lives, which is exactly what Holmes is talking about. And so we get to choose, and we get to differentiate and choose all along the way, because you and I are the choosers that impress upon this infinite presence certain ideas, and the sum total of those ideas manifests as our experience. So saying yes is so important, because saying yes is really about saying no to other things. Every time we say yes to something, we are saying no to something else. So if our goal is tremendous fitness, physical fitness, then what we end up doing is we say no to the practices in our lives that do not support fitness. If our goal is financial prosperity, then we look at our life, we look at the practices we have, and we realize, I'm going to say no to that because I'm saying yes to this. And the challenge I find in my own experience, and as I've been on this path with you and throughout most of my adult life, has been that if my yes isn't big enough, it's easy to slip back to the things that I think I'm saying no to, but really what I'm doing is saying yes to. Make sense? Can anybody here have an idea of what you might be? What are you saying yes to in your life that you'd like to have a greater experience? You can yell anything out, and you realize that what it is really about saying no to that experience. Anybody have anything they're saying yes to? Love. There you go. And so that's great. Thank you. Whoever said that, I thank you. So to have greater love, and Dr. Holmes, actually, I brought something along from Dr. Holmes to talk about today, because he speaks to that directly. Holmes says this. He says, this is perfect timing. This worked out great. I love that when the script works. But everything in nature moves in circles. What goes out must come back. So if we look at the cycle of nature, winter, spring, summer, fall, unless a seed is sown, it cannot bear fruit. And there must be a planting time for every harvest. Those who give all receive all. So this is very important. See, if you're all the way in, and how do we get to all the way in? Because that's scary. If you're all the way in, and that doesn't just mean financially, but it's easy to go there, but you're all the way in your soul and in your faith and in your commitment, then you receive the harvest of being all the way in. Those who refuse to give limit the possibility of the greater good returning to them. So he's not just talking about stuff. He's not talking about money anymore. He is talking about what's alive in our consciousness. See, what's really important, the scorecard we keep, we have a budget here, and it's great to have a budget. You gotta keep track. You don't want to spend what you don't have. Everybody needs a budget. You have to be good at arithmetic. Bertrand Russell, it's a quote from Marcia Sutton's Principles of Financial Freedom. Bertrand Russell said that most people would rather die than do arithmetic. I was just in Denver with our leadership council, and we were doing arithmetic. And we had a decision to make, and so we haven't made it yet, because with our culture, we have to float it out. We have to speak to the field. We have to speak to all the key players, and we have to. So a lot of our energy, there's a wonderful book called How NASA Builds Teams, and there's a quote from it. I don't remember the author, but there's a quote in it that said that he is convinced that 50% of every change is social. I would say in our culture that about 90% of every change is social. Because what happens, especially in faith community, is that you got to make sure everybody's in agreement. And if there's one person in the back room says, I don't like it, then we slow down and we go, well, tell us why you don't like it. And then, and so the question, we have an annual, well, I'm not going to go into details, but that's part of our culture. And so to work with that and understand that, how we can help and facilitate change. But maybe that's part of what's going on in your interior. You'd like to say yes to something, but in order to say yes, you have to say to certain things that you've carried with you for so long, or I have. It's very uncomfortable, because there's that little voice in the back that goes, wait a minute, what about this? What about this? Because I've always loved to do that. I don't want that to go away. And so it's just the nature of how we're wired. But unless we have the conversation, understand we all have those places where we become they become habit. So love, somebody yelled out. What did Holmes say about love? Dr. Holmes said, love and you will be loved. Pretty simple, isn't it? Love and you will be loved. Yeah, but I can't love some people in the world. There are bad people in the world. There are people I don't agree with. Don't confuse love with like. You can love everybody. You just don't have to like them. You don't have to approve of them. And that's a challenge, because and I'll talk about the kingdoms of consciousness a little bit today, but love and you will be loved. Extend joy and you will become more joyful. The ancient Talmud said God will doubly guide the already guided. Spirit, if you don't like the G word, Spirit will doubly guide the already guided. So if your affirmation is I'm infinitely guided, I'm divinely guided, and then we start to practice these things around love and being more loving. See, we are the generation that has taken form at this point in time on the planet, I'm convinced of this, to love. Love, love, love. I was at a performance last night for the Youth Emergency Shelter here in Edmonton. And I didn't know what I was going to. Laura said, well, I've got tickets for this event. We're going to go support it. And you know, I've been busy playing catch up and kind of getting my feet back on the ground since traveling so much for 2 weeks. I said, oh, okay. And I got there. I said, what are we doing? And it was amazing. It was amazing. These young people got up and performed. None of them were compensated. There were like 35 acts. Incredible stuff. Singers and dancers and all these wonderful, sort of the cream of the crop of young people in Edmonton that performed to raise money for the Youth Emergency Shelter. It was so inspiring, and they're going to do it again next year. And I'm scouting people for the community. I said, she should come and sing. You know, I'm always planning. I'm always scouting. So anyway, but it was an example of people taking their commitment to saying yes to a possibility of something that in the greater Edmonton area that works for a lot of youth. Gives them a place, gives them a home, gives them a place where they can get support and insight and awareness. But it's an act of love. And then what they did last night, they extended joy. So extend joy and you'll become more joyful. Spirit will doubly guide the already guided. And Jesus of Nazareth, one of the great teachers and avatars. Now, we don't view Jesus as that everyone has to go through Jesus to get to God. Because the Buddhists would say, well, I don't have that experience. The Hindus would say, that's not my experience. But they honor Jesus as a great prophet. But what he said is, given it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, shall men give into their bosom. For with the same measure that ye met with, it shall be measured to you again. So as we give, we receive. It's right there. He talked about it. It's not a secret. But of course, they made a movie about it, The Law of Cause and Effect, The Secret. We do not give because God needs the gift, but because the giving increases, broadens, and deepens the life of the giver. So when we understand that, when we do everything from the sense of, I'm giving because I can, I give because I'm it's a spiritual practice. So I give my gifts, I give my talents, I give my time, I give my treasure. Because what it does, it's a practice that broadens and deepens the life of the giver. And when we understand that, but it's the journey to get there and the awareness. Holmes says, how wonderful is this exact balance which spirit and nature keep. How perfect is the law of good, and how glorious the opportunity to join with the infinite giver in the givingness of the self to the joy of life. So as we shift and we grow in consciousness, and so spiritual practice is about shifting the mental equivalent. The mental equivalent, I'll make sure I'm honoring time here, but the mental equivalent is a principle that is supported in all of the spiritual teachings, even the most of the fundamental traditions. But mental equivalent is creating within our own consciousness an idea that, because we become so clear with it, that it has to be filled. I stayed with a leadership council friend in Denver, Eileen Flanagan, and Eileen's going to be with us, I think, sometime in September, October. I'm going to bring her in to do some board development and also as a Sunday speaker, because she's just an amazing, phenomenal consciousness. And she was talking about growing up in a family of 4 girls. And every time the girls would get a job growing up, because they're all expected to work, they'd get a job, and then their mom and dad would say to them, "That's wonderful that you got this job." Gans's daughter's right down in the nursery right now. And I love this idea. So Eileen would say, the parents would always say, "That's wonderful, I'm proud of you, way to go, keep going, and I can't wait to see how you end up doing this on your own. I look forward to the day that you do this on your own." So she grew up in a consciousness, so the mental equivalent that she was exposed to was this consciousness, this is great. This is a great place to start. And you have the opportunity to move forward and step into the consciousness of entrepreneur and do this on your own. And so what it does is it plants seeds with children. So when we talk about how we plant seeds, how we create a bigger mental equivalent, I mean, isn't it interesting the subtleties of that? Because it could be for some, for some, if the experience is, oh, hang on to that job for dear life, could be the last one you ever get. Keep everybody happy. Don't get fired. I mean, there's all those conversations that can go on that see people smiling. But it's such a powerful idea. I can't wait till you do this on your own. And so Eileen said it was the mental equivalent. That became the mental equivalent of the family. So now the parents have both passed away, but 3 of the 4 girls run their own businesses very successfully. And she tells her story. She tells her story of how the evolution of the business and the evolution of her consciousness. But it was those seeds planted by mom and dad that becomes the mental equivalent. One of the things I love about being on the leadership council is I'm around people and they have ideas that I would never think of on my own. They become my mental equivalent. I go to the Mile High Church and I watch Dr. Roger Teal. I went to Brazil with him. I went to see a John of God with him and his group. And I watch what he's doing. And I watch how he's gathered people around him and the expertise he's gathered around him and the inspiration. And he's my mental equivalent. So whenever I see him, I pay attention. I love watching this guy. And every time he shares a gem with me, I write it down. That's for me. That's for me. That's for me. I'm saying yes to that. I choose that. And then I get to come home and I go, well, where am I saying yes to something that is not supporting me moving into that? I'll tell you this story. I thought about telling, but I'm speaking at our Silomar conference this year, but I don't think any of you are going, so I'll go ahead and share it. But when I was in the Fillmore Church we were called the Center for Positive Living, and we were Religious Science International at the time, and this was back in 1996. And so I went into that church. There was nobody there. There were like 3 members. Everybody left when I showed up. I mean, I was part of the community, and I'd studied ministry, and then I went from being the usher to the guy in front doing the talk on Sundays, and they're like, "What?" And they'd head out the door, And so I knew that those people that I had become my friends and had become part of the community were not going to be the people that probably wanted to study and grow with me. And they were very much attached to my teacher, Reverend Catherine Yates, wonderful, wonderful teacher. So I got all that. So everything got cleared out. It was empty space. And so what I did is I went to work about building my own consciousness. I realized, okay, I'm here. I don't have to worry about making a salary because they weren't paying me anything. My biggest concern was energy, because I was running my own, had a cabinet business and a residential remodeling business that I kept me going. And so what happened was there was time and people showed up and there was a little bit more space in my life. I started to fix the church up. And so physical buildings always, anybody here ever own a house? Anybody here besides me needs upkeep? You know this? And so there were things to fix, and so we did everything, because everything needed fixing, and over time we did everything. I built an 11-circuit labyrinth, we built a big meditation garden, put a beautiful fence up, we had a new gate that rolled, and you could push the button and the gate would roll shut and open, and we put a new roof on, and we painted the entire place. I poured patios all around it, because I'm thinking, we'll do a wedding business here, and we need more patios for summer weddings, and on and on and on, okay? And so I fixed it all up. And then when I left there, ministers came behind me and they didn't quite have my energy. And I'm not saying it's critical, because I don't think anybody, we're all wired differently, right? But the person that came behind me was not a building contractor, wasn't comfortable doing a lot of the stuff, and that wasn't why we were hired anyway, or the ministers. But I happened to be able to do that, and so I did that. And so as time went by, it was not sustainable. There weren't enough people showing up, there wasn't enough money to pay somebody to do it full time, which is what a minister would really like to do, is be compensated and be able to devote one's full attention to it. But what I did in all the repairs I did to the facility, when they went to finally realize this is not viable anymore, we're going to sell the building. So the building was put up and they sold the building, and it was a lot of money that was brought into the organization, because when the building sold and there was no longer a church there, all the money went to the home organization. It was almost $1 million. And I was really proud that I had done so much good work, because when I left it, the place was really, really in great shape. It was very clean, it was freshly painted, new roof, ready for a new occupant to step in without saying in the negotiations, it needs this and it needs that. It was all done. And it's still there in this beautiful 11th Circuit labyrinth, and every once in a while when Laura and I are in Southern California, I drive by to peek over the fence and see the labyrinth that I laid every tile for, and for me it's very sweet. And so the money went to the organization. The organization took the money and they used it for certain things, to try things with conferences and events, and that didn't work out. So pretty much all that money was used to experiment. So all that money that was there went away. Was used to move out into the world and to go. We went to San Diego and we signed this big contract. We thought we'd have 1,000 people show up for an event, and 300 people showed up, and we lost a substantial amount of money. And so so I can look at it in many ways. If I'm in kingdom number 1, which is victim consciousness, the kingdom of slow creation, this is called. Slow creation. When people are in victim consciousness, it feels like nothing's changing. I'm stuck. Where everything is done to us, it's victim consciousness. Our spirit is asleep, we follow the leader consciousness. Our false beliefs and fears are communicating directly with our emotions. And so there were times when I would go into victim consciousness and feel like, oh man, we blew it. Did all that hard work, never even got a thank you from the organization. I was here when they sold it. But I thought, you think somebody on the leadership would say, thank you for all the great work you did. And I'm thinking, and I'm in victim consciousness, I'm thinking this. I'm entitled to a thank you at least, And so there's that element. And so I share it with you because that passed over my awareness a few times. And then I got a chance to look at that. And then I realized, that's not a very interesting idea. And all I'm doing when I dwell on it is I get more and more ticked off. And then I start finding the people to blame. Isn't that fun? Not only am I going to be upset, but now I got to find the people that are really at fault here. So I decided, I think I need to shift my perspective on this. And so I went into I made the commitment to put. So I invited this infinite intelligence to guide me into a bigger idea. And so in the second kingdom of consciousness, so in the first kingdom it's called we see the light. The light's over there. I'm not in it, but we see the light. And then as we move spiritually into the second kingdom, all of a sudden the light is in us. The light is in us, and all of a sudden it's this experience. So when we claim our oneness with Spirit, all of a sudden, I feel that. So when we come together on Sunday, I think we step into that. Beautiful music, beautiful consciousness, where this place is prayed up in here. And so the light is in us. And Marcia Sutton and Lloyd Strom would say from the co-creation work is the awakening of the Spirit activates the mind, and fear does not hold us back anymore. Because when I'm in that consciousness about not being thanked and what we had going away, it's fear-based. It's lack and limitation. There's not enough. We blew it. Courage is not the absence of fear and doubt. It is the ability to see it and to do it anyway. It's the ability to see it and do it anyway. Desire to possess takes self-confidence in this kingdom to survive. So we start to build our oneness with Spirit. We start to build an identity because the light is in us, and yet we still feel separate from the light sometimes. And so when I stepped into this kingdom of consciousness, I'm still sort of mourning, but I'm pushing it down. I'm realizing, okay, I'm not going to go into the fear. I'm not going to go into the blame. I'm pushing it down, I'm pushing it down, I'm pushing it down. And then I'm starting to look at the benefits it had for me. But I'm still not, and so I see the benefits, but I'm not feeling the benefits. And so I have the idea in my head, but it's not in my heart. It hasn't gone from my lips to my heart. But I'm giving it space in my head now. Well, that was valuable because it grew my consciousness. Yeah, but we blew all that money. But that was valuable because it grew my consciousness. Yeah, but we blew all that money. And so I'm in that position of back and forth, a duality, which is not love. Okay? But I want to use this as an example because I think I can find myself doing this over and over and over again. What I find is that I spend less time in Kingdom 1 and Kingdom 2. So in the Kingdom 2 is also challenge the leader. So then I'm looking at the organization and say, who made the decision to do this in San Diego? And we lost all this money. We gave all this money away. And then I'm picking them out. It's challenge the leader consciousness, which is quite a wonderful activity if that's where you want to spend your time. You see it in politics all the time. As soon as the other party gets elected, it's true in Canada, it's true in the United States. As soon as the other person gets elected, all of a sudden there's a whole group saying, let's look and watch and see what he's doing. And it goes on, doesn't matter who's in office. In this kingdom, we are bound to our own ideas where things are done by us. Courage is required to push down the fear. It's where faith is developed. So this kingdom is not a bad place to be. None of these kingdoms are a bad place to be. So as soon as we judge them, we're right back in Kingdom 1. You just have the understanding and the insight. Okay, I'm in Kingdom 2. I want to challenge the leader. I'm developing my faith. And the journey from Kingdom 2 to Kingdom 3 is you have to give up control. Because when you step into Kingdom 2, all of a sudden you say, I'm controlling my life. I'm directing my life. I'm setting an intention, and I'm creating the invitation to have this experience. That's Kingdom 2. And that works in Kingdom 2. But then from Kingdom 2 to Kingdom 3, you have to give up control and you have to surrender to Spirit, which is totally different than what was successful in Kingdom 2. It's where we hear about the dark night of the soul, where faith is developed. So we are tempered by that burning off the dross of error beliefs or false beliefs about ourselves. So in Kingdom 3, and so I've got all this stuff going on. I'm pushing down the fear. I'm trying not to blame, but I am blaming. I know the names of people, but I'm not going to say anything. And, it's incompetent. But when you move into Kingdom 3 and you surrender control and you surrender to this divine presence because you've built the faith, it's kingdom of self-realization, where the primary focus is being whole. And so when I'm in that kingdom, what I'm able to do is look back at all the time I spent in the Fillmore Church and say, thank you, Divine Presence, for guiding me and creating the opening in my life so I could spend the time there. Thank you for every minute I spent building the labyrinth and repairing everything and watching people step up. On Mother's Day one year, we planted all these beautiful bougainvillea along the border. There's a beautiful wall of these. I love, one of my favorite plants in the world is colorful bougainvillea that don't grow in Edmonton very well. But they're beautiful. So so when I'm in that kingdom, then I can say, and thank you for all the people that showed up to help guide and change and shift my consciousness. And thank you for the opportunity to be of service so that I could give this, so that our organization could find the courage to step out in the world and say, we want to take our movement to the world. We want to share this with people. So the vision was there, the consciousness that helped sustain it, and the sequential steps to grow to that point were perhaps in place. And so then I get to look at it from the perspective of gratitude and appreciation. That I was able to be part of that. I was able to in some small way, this tiny little congregation in Fillmore, California, it's a little dot on the map, 13,000 people, was able to take the resources and allow us to step out in a bigger way and try something. And I'm so grateful to be part of that. Because we're not limited. That little church and the sale of that property is not my source. This is exactly what we teach. We talk about the infinite presence being our source. And so I share that with you because that's my journey through the kingdoms. And so now I've made peace with it. I realize, wow, that was a wonderful thing to be part of. We tried that. And now we know to try it differently, that perhaps is not the right idea. But there's another idea that wants to happen. And so in your life, you're going to have ideals, you're going to have goals, you're going to have things you want to step out and experience. And you're going to go in that direction. And your ideal is probably not going to match the experience that you have. But if you don't stretch in that direction, if you don't say, I want more love in my life, so I'm going to be more loving. I want to be a contagion of joy in my life. I want to be a force for good upon this planet. But if I haven't developed the consciousness that it takes for me to move in that direction, I'm going to be disappointed. But if I understand that what it is a journey of consciousness and developing my consciousness and your consciousness, and work with myself wisely and lovingly, with respect and honoring, and say, man, I couldn't have done any more in Fillmore. I gave 100% to that. And for me, but I say that not because I feel entitled or that someone should pat me on the back. I say that as a way of saying you did the best you could, man. Let's raise our hands in celebration, declare victory, and move on. And the same thing here. It's not that everything here is perfect, that you've shifted and changed, but the nature of what we're asked to do, I believe we're called as ministers to give birth to the transformation of consciousness, which then shows up in the world of experience. It's not that you do everything pristine and you have every perfect conversation with everyone and everyone is happy and joyful, because that's just not the nature of life. Part of change sometimes can be messy. But it's to understand it's the nature of what we're doing, and if we have a big enough yes in our lives, it will get messy sometimes. It will be uncomfortable sometimes. But then to be able to back up when we feel overwhelmed, or we feel like we've stepped out too far, or we spent more than we have, or we've done something that we shouldn't have done, and to be able to just say, take a breath, and create the spaciousness in our lives to honor what we've done. To honor what we've done and know that our life is not just form. It's just not the details. It's God's presence. There's a mystery that we live in. There's an unseen force for good that we are immersed in. And the way that we develop more and more of that in our lives is by understanding that. And I tell people all the time, it's so important to do our forgiveness work, because our forgiveness work, and especially for ourselves, what happens when we do our forgiveness work, it allows us to take responsibility. And see, don't confuse responsibility with blame. Responsibility, if I'm responsible for my experience on this planet, if I'm responsible for my life, it allows me to make changes. See, responsibility is a Kingdom 2 and a Kingdom 3 activity. I take responsibility for all of it. The great avatars, the great teachers say, I take responsibility for all of it. And there's some days I get up, I look out in the world, I don't want to take responsibility for all of it. But what we're talking about is taking responsibility for how we perceive what's going on. And then we know if we're responsible, we realize we can help make change. But if I don't take responsibility, then I'm a complete victim. Then I'm stuck with what conditions are. Well, there's not enough. This is just not enough. We do things around here. We've done divine dinings. They're beautiful. I love the divine dinings. We've done a gala. We've done galas, 3 or 4 galas, and big galas. We did a smaller gala this year in terms of size and scope and vision, because we realized we had so many new people. We wanted to get as many people in the room as possible. But when I look at the community, this is a live organization. And so when we're doing things that support you and connecting and lifting you up and being part of community, and then certain ideas run their course. So say we're going to do the gala again, and so I called every one of you and forced you to buy tickets to the gala, because I'm the minister and you've got to buy tickets. You probably wouldn't like that. I don't want that job. What it is measuring and looking at what's alive and saying, this has run its course. Let's put that down and honor it, and we could pick it up later. Maybe it's a time for sabbatical there. But what's the new idea that wants to happen? Let's look at that. Let's move in that direction. And see, that's a more interesting and I think a healthier perspective, and the same thing in our lives. You may have certain things in your life that have gone stale. Spiritual practice, your meditation practice, your prayer practice, time for a new idea, time for a bigger idea. So it's working wisely and continuing to forgive ourselves and do the work. I want to share this one beautiful story that I heard this last week when I was traveling. And it's a true story. It's one of my minister friends. And a woman, and this is about saying yes or no. I think it's just so important. Yes and no are so important in our life. So a mother came to one of the ministers that I was visiting with this last week and said, I'm getting ready to pay off my daughter's credit cards. She's 30 years old. This is the 3rd time I've paid off her credit cards for her, because this is her pattern. So my minister friend said to her, Why would you do that? And she said, well, she's my daughter and I want to help her out. And and she said, well, let me say that as you say yes to this, paying the credit cards off for the third time, what you're saying no to. You're saying no that your daughter is capable of doing this on her own. You're saying no that she doesn't have gifts and talents and skills to go out and build a life of her own. You're saying no that she's not creative, that she's not employable, that she doesn't have gifts and talents that the world needs. So your yes to this is no to that. And so the mother said, interesting way to look at it, isn't it? So she decided this time not to pay her daughter's credit cards off. And she came back 2 weeks later, sat down with my minister friend, and she said, I need to thank you. And she said, well, what happened? And she said, well, I went and told my daughter, I'm not going to pay your credit cards off for you. And I said, what happened? She said, well, she screamed and hollered and cried and stamped her feet and got very upset. And what did you do? She said, I watched her. And she said, you know what happened? 2 days ago, she went out and got her first job to pay off her own credit cards. Just saying. So, I think we are called in our lives all the time to be really, really mindful of what we're saying yes to. And if our yes is big enough for one another, then we understand and it's so much easier to say no. And so how many times in my own experience have I said yes to things that don't support my bigger yes, which limits my own experience of life? It's so simple, isn't it? But so profoundly powerful. So I just know for myself, and invite you to know with me, that you and I continue to be guided in the wisest and most beautiful discernment of our yeses. And our yes becomes so big that it just becomes easy to say no. Blessings. Thank you.